Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Grow Your Tutoring Business with me and Vicky today. So welcome Vicky.
Thank you.
Always a pleasure, although it has taken about 15 minutes for you to get comfortable and in a space where you feel like the lighting's good, you've got your quality street out, like as a stand.
Pushing me here.
Honestly, it's been very traumatic just to press record. Anyway, we're up and running, and we want to talk about opening a tuition centre because this is something that gets asked quite a lot.
It's a fact, remember.
Which I'm going to change to FAQ because that's too close to the bone for me.
Question.
We're going to get into the phonics now, making sure it's an sound. So it's a frequently asked question, and there's not a really easy answer for it other than sharing our experience because we've both gone down that route. We've got a space which we called our own. I wouldn't have really considered it a tuition centre as such. Just because
I think we've had this conversation before about what do you call it?
If you say the word tuition centre, what do you see in your head? I think for me, maybe I see it as like a building where there's lots of different rooms where you might go for different things, maybe. Whereas I've got a tuition, I don't even know what I really call it, a tuition space, an office. I'm not really sure.
Yeah, I call it like our learning space and things like that. But yeah, I've struggled with what to call it.
Yeah. So it gets asked quite a lot about like how do you set it up, or even like
if it's right for you.
Yeah, and almost to a point where I think I carry a little bit of worry around when somebody says or asks those sorts of questions, because I think there are other questions that we should ask before we start talking about a tuition centre. And I know there are franchises out there or other business coaches who would sort of say, like, you need to follow a particular path. I don't think you have to do these things, but I think with a tuition centre, I think there are certain things you could have in place before you even consider it. Like, for example, knowing that your business is making a set amount so you don't have to worry about the first few months. Because it could give us some added cost anyway, or unexpected cost. Anyway, let's start right at the beginning. What did we want to start with? When we was planning this? What did we say we'd start with?
We are starting with the question why and why now.
Okay, so what made you go toward or move towards having or opening a centre?
So for context, when I first started, I knew I was going straight in with groups, straight into a community space. So I was hiring a room in a like church hall space. So I quite quickly decided that I was fed up with hiring the space that wasn't mine, because I had to get in there, like set up the tables. There were those, the tables that you have in school for school dinners where you have to like pull the legs up, and trapped my finger a few times and broke my nails. Oh, no. So that was really upsetting. And also just the space itself. So I was doing maths and 11 plus tuition. And I like to have like stuff for them to play with and to move things around, have quite hands-on lessons. So I was having to cart things around, make sure that I remembered everything, have it in my like little trolley box, bringing it round with me. That started to get annoying. I'd be like walking down the corridor with the wheel in the box, and there'd be like a trail of counters falling out of it and stuff like that. So that started to just get on my nerves, and also just the space itself feeling like it just wasn't to my taste, and I couldn't do anything with it. to make it mine because I only had it for that set time. Um, so those things started to just like niggle away at me, I suppose,
Sure.
after a while.
How long, because you're relatively new really to business still, so how long did it take for you to sort of move from the church space into your office?
Okay, so this is quite quick.
Mm.
But what would you expect? So I was in the church space from the September, and then I moved in here, where I'm now in the January.
So you were saying just before that this is pretty much your 1 year anniversary. Is it tomorrow?
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
tomorrow. Yeah, so we've been in a year, so which is obviously going well. But yeah, so it was quite quick that I decided like, oh, I'm getting my own place.
But there are reasons for that, though, aren't there? Like when we were talking about this and we were planning for it, we were talking about how like we could rush into something because we think it might be the solution or that it make us feel successful,
Yeah,
and we have to be really careful of these things. So I want people who are thinking about this as an option to kind of hear the success stories, because you can find those like yourself and what I've achieved here, but also on the flip side of that, know that there are risks involved, and we want to make sure everybody gets all of the information. So I know, because I talk to a lot of tutors, that we can take in like this mindset of, if only I could get a tuition centre, or if only I could get this thing,
yeah,
and it'll feel better, it will do better. I think if you are looking at opening a tuition centre at some point in the future, there are certain things you'd like to have in place to make it feel more secure. Like, for example, like you were working out of a church space for 2 evenings a week,
yes,
but it started to grow from there, didn't it?
yeah. So when I first started and I was trying to work out my business model, and I knew that I only wanted to work 2 evenings a week. So I obviously wanted to maximize that time and the profitability of the business. So I went straight in with groups, and I worked out I could do 4 groups each evening. So 8 groups in total. So I was doing 8 hours over those 2 nights. And then the cost of that, it soon adds up. So it was £20 an hour. So obviously then I was paying like £160 a week, just to rent that space. So then when I started to kind of get those grumbles and looked at the cost of what I was paying compared to the cost of having somewhere that was completely mine, started to just feel like this sort of no-brainer, especially when then I started to think bigger and yeah, so looked at so I mean, I don't like to say like lucky because I feel like that undervalues like the hard work
Mm.
that we've put in. But I was grateful to have got quite a lot of clients quite quickly, and it was expanding quite quickly. And then I started to get questions where they wanted to come, but they couldn't do the days I was doing. And they were like, could you do a Thursday? And I couldn't because that was the boundary that I'd put in place for myself. But I had a friend who could. So then she started to do an hour on a Thursday. And so then I'm paying for an extra hour again. And so then that's when I started to think, well, what if I could get someone else to do a Tuesday, or we could find somewhere that you could have another group. And so that's what started my thinking about, well, this could actually be an opportunity
Mm.
rather than trying to for it to be something that would mend something that wasn't working. So it's more looking at how is this going to help expand and grow rather than like fix anything that's going wrong. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
yeah, totally. And I suppose that's why I asked the question, because these things often have like this rite of passage almost. And I think sometimes we can be, I say we, I mean people who support other businesses, like whether it's through courses or through one-to-one support or whatever. There, in the past, there's been like, well, before you do groups, you must do one-to-one, right? Before you expand to have other tutors, you must have like tutored for so long yourself, like prove the concept. I think those things we've managed to do, those myths, I call them, we've managed to debunk over the last couple of years. I don't think that stuff's true at all. In fact, with groups in mind, I actually think it's way easier to start with groups than to transition
Well,
from
I
one
know
to
it
two.
is.
Well,
So,
that's what you did. And I've also supported people who are completely stuck offering one-to-one because that's all that's their brand, whether they liked it or not, that's what they was known for. And so it's been really tricky for them. So I know those things aren't true. I think with this in mind, there is an element of you need to make sure you've run the numbers properly and you're doing it for the right reasons. Like, so the right reasons for you was, like, I'm getting consistent inquiries about tuition, which I cannot do myself. This is a realistic opportunity to grow and expand the business. And the choices in front of me are to hire the church hall space that I'm currently using, which is going to increase my costs, which is fine because that's just a business cost, like to a cost of running a business where you say, right, it's going to cost me an extra, what would we say? Let's say an extra £400 a month, but that extra £400 a month I'm spending will allow the business to earn an extra £3,000 or £4,000. So it's still a relatively good investment. But when you compare it to the other option, which is I can get this space, it's quite close. And it's almost what I'm paying now, and I'm only doing 2 meetings a week. And it's my space all the time.
yeah.
Like it's not just for these little window of time where you're kind of then forced in at a certain time and out at a certain time. So I think that once you start running the numbers and start looking at it in a really logical sense, sometimes the decision's made for you just by looking at it or zooming out, we would say, by zooming out from the problem, you go, actually, this is quite an easy thing. But you want to have a secure business knowing that it's ready to expand.
Yes. I mean, I obviously like flippantly say, well, I was fed up of breaking my nails, putting the tables out. But obviously, I looked at the numbers and looked at what would I have to do to cover that? And it's like, well, if I got one extra group, it would pay for itself,
Yeah.
And actually, the potential is I could have an extra 20 groups, So yeah, so it did come. It started to just be that no brainer, really. Plus, the space that I was looking at is so the space that I'm in that I got is across the road from the church that I was in.
Yeah.
So it was really close. So there was no question around like, oh, but will people still come to this location or anything like that? Not that I don't think people should overthink that sort of stuff. But it's something to just consider. The only thing that was my main worry about the space itself was that the steps that come up to the front door, because we're on the first floor, so there's like a staircase outside. And I agonized for a long time thinking like, oh, will people be put off by the steps? No one has cared about steps.
That's what we overthink though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because I probably would overthink the location, but not so much the steps. And I think it might depend on where you're located. So I'm in the south of England in a city called Canterbury. It's a medieval city. The roads are rubbish, and it gets really busy at the time when I'm busiest, right? So after school, like the roads get chocker, and sometimes, and it's not a big place, Canterbury. It's quite small, but it can take you half hour to get from one side to the other. When realistically, it's probably a 5 or 6 minute drive if the roads are clear. When I was first looking, I'll go through a little bit of like my kind of movement towards having this office space. But when I was first looking, a few office spaces were open in town and some really nice ones. But I just couldn't trust the traffic. So if my first session started at 4 and a parent got stuck in traffic, they wouldn't make it. And then
Yeah.
it's like, I know if I'm going into town for an appointment at that time, I would give myself 40 to 45 minutes. And
Wow.
sometimes I could get there in 10, which means I'm there half hour early. And other times I'm running around sweating because I know I'm going to struggle. And it felt like a genuine consideration. I was like, where am I going to go that's going to give access to people in the most easiest way? And with all of that in mind, I mean, I was still lucky to find the place that I did find, and there wasn't many that made it. I was actually kind of drew a little like radius just outside of the city ring road and get anywhere around here would be amazing, because if you can avoid the ring road, you're generally okay.
Right.
So actually, I think location is something which I probably would spend a bit of time thinking, depending on your own situation. Like, because here's a nightmare. But whereas if I was going just outside, or maybe going to somewhere which is close, like Ashford or Margate, which is just about a half-hour drive away from me, in those locations, I probably wouldn't worry in the same way, because that's access is relatively okay. So it wouldn't matter. So I do agree with you there. I think, like, just bringing it back to like more of a logical sense, there, if the finances are okay and you've got groups up and running, and it's working, like, why would you change something that's working? Like, if you don't have, well, what don't you have? What do you gain by staying in a community space? Like, that's like a lot of flexibility in your business. Like,
Yeah.
if you had an evening where someone or a group of people went, oh, we can't make that anymore because of something's changed, you don't pay for that hour anymore. So there are things to consider. Like, if you wanted to stay like without having a monthly outgoing that's definite, and you wanted it to be a little bit more flexible, you could be more reactive, that would be a reason to stay within a community space. Whereas if you know you just want people to come to you, and that's going to be far easier, then start looking around. I'm just going to sprinkle another piece of information here. Like, when I was looking, I was quite shocked by some of the prices. I don't know whether you had this, Vicky, up by you.
Um, I can't remember, to be honest.
You.
I I think possibly some of them were like a bit crazy expensive, which I just would dismiss straight away. And then
Yeah.
another thing that I was worried about was things like so if it was in a shared office, I would worry about things like the toilets. Like
Mm.
the kids go into the toilet and things, things like that. Thinking, oh, would I have to take them? So the place that I'm in has obviously got its own like toilets and stuff. So yeah, but I think I just sort of decided on a budget probably, and
Mm.
didn't look at anything like above that. The worst of, I mean, I did look at somewhere and it was literally one room. It was almost just like a converted garage, really. That was really expensive, and I just thought, I don't know how you even
Gonna-
got the nerve to advertise that.
I felt like the options were quite limited for what I had in my head of what I wanted to have. And when I was looking on places like Rightmove and Zoopla, and there was a couple of others, I can't remember,
Yeah,
they were the main two. The thing that kept coming up was like the industrial units, like the stuff behind behind Sainsbury's or Tesco.
yeah,
But it was like starting at like £1,600 a month. And they were
that's
long-term
crazy. Yeah.
leases as well. And they weren't ready, which meant you'd have to go in and invest money in the putting up stud walls or ripping out a kitchen to make sure it was sort of in a workable state. And so it meant, like, one, signing up to something which I was still unsure was something which I did want to go down that route, but I was unsure of the long-term viability. So signing up to something even for a year, knowing that I was going to be liable for it for a whole year was worrying. But then knowing I'd probably have to take out a loan to then sort the room out to make it workable was the other thing. I'm very much about whatever you do in business, if you're going to the next phase, like, investing your time and energy to make it a success and not put too much stress and strain. Like, you will always have stress and strain in your business. And if you don't, one, tell me your secret, but also probably a sign that you're not doing it right. I don't know. That might be the wrong thing to say. But I didn't want the financial pressure, especially if like I'd have invested say 15 grand to make it
Well,
work,
yeah,
plus the 1600 on top, plus utilities, getting the broadband sorted out,
yeah,
and even like a doubt over whether people would have gone to one of those places for tuition anyway. I don't know. There's a lots of question marks.
yeah. That's a
So,
lot of pressure if you've got that level, that amount of rent, like you say, plus those extra bills on top, and then a loan payment as well. So you've got to fill a lot of spaces just to cover that before you're even making any profit. Then,
I think I was quite lucky in the end. So my route was similar to yours in that I had community space, and it was it wasn't 25, so it's been 20 and 25. I can't remember what it ended up as. And I was doing a couple of hours a week there, and then the rest I was just traveling around. And then I made that decision to go, do you know what? I'm going to work from home. I'm going to get a cabin built in the garden. I'm going to run groups sort of 5 nights a week, which again was a cost. There was still an investment in that. I just did it over time. I had it built over 6 months, doing different stages of the build. And then when it actually came around to it, it didn't really work. It didn't work for a number of reasons. Firstly, I live in a terraced house, which meant people coming through my house into the back garden.
it's intrusive.
Yeah, and can be quite invasive for that as well. Like, so it just felt a little bit uncomfortable. I was willing to live with the uncomfortableness, if I'm honest. Like, I would have just carried on if that was the only problem. But then there are other things like, even though your garden is a private space, it's still next door to other people's private spaces. So like people were working out I live like it's a student city. So there's students on our street, they're working out in their garden. So they would like have loud music on, and you couldn't control what they were saying. I've got a neighbor that would shout, and I'd be like, it just felt uncomfortable. Like there was an interesting post in our group the other day saying about like, I want to start. These are my goals. I want it to feel very professional, and I was the same, and it didn't feel very professional because
Okay.
I had to kind of say to parents, I'm really sorry, but they probably would have heard
Oh no.
this, or and I just couldn't
Well,
control that. So in the end, and it wasn't
sorry,
long. I
you
think.
saw the guy next door sunbathing naked.
Yeah, and if you peek now, you might too. So it just felt like it wasn't the right fit, and so that comes with a bit of a warning, because I know people ask about cabins as well. It wasn't the right fit for me, and that's when I started looking properly, and I found like this office space relatively quickly, and I moved into quite a small office up here, and it's shared office spaces. We all have our own individual units, so we don't share a natural space, but it's like offices next to one another. And
How long did the cabin last?
like
Sorry.
3 months.
Right.
So it got built in the January.
Yeah.
I think I did my first session in there in the February, and then by April I was out.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
because
Oh,
it just felt too risky. But
yeah.
we all know like word of mouth is how we grow, right? So we can do all the marketing and we can get people on board, but if it's not a good service or something's not right, they're not going to stick around. They're not going to tell people about it. I
Yeah.
thought like this is something which I really wanted to grow. I knew I wanted to go all in on it. It wasn't going to allow that. So I needed to make the change. So I sort of made up my mind probably by mid-March. I probably 4 weeks in, I was like, this isn't going to work. And then I needed to change it. So I came up, and I was surprised here at the cost, because I've been seeing other things where it was like £1,600 plus like the utilities was going to be about £300 to £400 a month. And there was no parking. There was so many different things that I was like, oh, I don't know, it's not going to work. But coming up here, it was really good price. Space was good. There was free parking for parents. There was a lounge. There were just so many things or elements that came together that made it work. But there were still unexpected costs. So I had the deposit, and then the 1 month up front. So it was a 1 month up front, a deposit plus 1 month up front plus 1 month of the
Yeah.
rent. So it was
Right.
basically 3 months rent. And then about 3 months in, I got a bill for business rates, and I had no idea what this was. And so, and it was, oh, do you know what? It wasn't 3 months. I think it was 6 months in, because I remember
Ooh.
thinking, wow, it's a lot of money.
Yes, that
And I
would have been.
hadn't factored it in because I didn't know about it. It actually turned out I didn't need to pay it.
Yeah,
I was under, it's all about, I won't bore everybody with this. It was basically rateable. It's what your rentable rates are across the year. And I was under the threshold, but I do have to challenge this. Like every 3 or 4 months, I'll still get a bill and I
yeah,
have to phone up and do the dance with them and go, oh, I'm not above the rate. But you might be. So if you start renting a space and you are above the threshold, that will be something you need to factor in. So this is done to give all the information out there because I want to make sure everybody gets what they need. So that you can really plan properly for it. I think as well, it's a good place to sort of say that now you've got some of this information and you know that you're going to invest some money into this. This is why we started with the why question. Why now? Why do you want to do it? Is it this shiny object syndrome? Is there something related to success in there? Like you feel like, oh, if I just had my own center, it would mean it's a successful business. Is that
yeah,
really true? Or are you just as successful if you are still traveling around or you're going to community spaces and your groups are full? What does success really look like for you? What is it that you really want it to look like? And this comes back to your vision. Like, what's the vision for your business and the vision for yourself? So I think that that's a really good point. Was there anything in your setup that surprised you, Vicky, like in the movement across and
So we sort of just talked about the flexibility that you get with the community space. So, yeah, if you decide after a few months, like, oh, that hour doesn't work for me, I want to swap and change and like drop that, and or I'm not in that week because it's school holidays, I'm not paying. Like that's, I mean, obviously it depends on whatever contract you sign with the place, but they generally are quite flexible. Whereas moving into a proper rented premises is fixed and you get like tied in. So I know yours is a bit different, isn't it? You're on like a rolling contract,
yeah,
but
mine's called easy and easy out. So I have to give a month's notice and that's it.
see, I think that is a real find
Mm,
for you then, because where I am, it's on a lease, and it's all like done through a solicitor's contract, and so that all that had to get done. Obviously, had the deposit, which was quite an investment, I guess. It was empty, so I had to completely furnish everything, decorate it. So there was a lot of investment up front. And I've signed a lease that's 3 years. So I suppose that's a huge consideration as well is I am tied in for 3 years, which really means you have to think about it like, can you make that work for that time? Personally, like for me, I I'm not put off by that. Probably because I'm just like, okay, well, that just means I'm gonna like keep going with this, make it work, and I find that quite motivating because I know, well, I've got those costs I've got to pay now, also,
mm.
and I've got tutors I've got to pay. I want to pay myself a decent, so that motivates me to keep pushing. But I also see the flip side of that actually that's also really stressful. That's a lot of pressure.
Which is why I suppose it like making the switch across needs to be done at the right time. Like so,
Yeah.
if you know that you've got, I don't know, you said you had 8 groups. You've got 8 groups you can just pick up and move, and you're not going to lose them, and you
Mm,
know that covers your cost but keeps you still in profit, and then enables you to do another, I don't know, another 8 groups once you find the clients. Like it ends up feeling much better. Whereas if you're doing it and you're right at the start and you're not even sure of how you're finding clients yet. Like, that wouldn't make any sense.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
think the stress factor and the like personal resilience is probably also like something to think about, because it is going to be a challenge. Like it's just not going to be like a walk in the park. There's going to be things that come up. There's probably, I mean, unless you've done this before in like a different industry or something, there's probably going to be things that you're like, oh, I had no idea about that. Like you say, like the business rates. Just didn't know about it. So we've learned so much as you go along, and that does require a level of like personal growth and resilience. And if the rest of your life is like super stressful and you feel like I don't have room for any more, then maybe this is not the right time. That like this is not the right season of life for you to be doing that. Maybe you need that flexibility that a community space gives, and later down the line this might be something that you want to look at. So I think that's something to consider, not just the costings but also like the cost on you, like your stress levels, your mental health,
yeah.
is also just as important.
Yeah, agree with all of that. I think that's very well put. The other thing that I think I want to kind of shoehorn at this stage is like another why question. Why face to face when there are other options out there? Why would somebody anchor themselves down to a physical space when you could just use Zoom and it'll cost you £13 a month? Why go and spend? So my room now, I've moved from my smaller office into a bigger one. My fixed cost on the room all in is about £1,100 every single month, whereas I could just do online Zoom and just pay 13. So why have I chosen to do face to face? Why have you chosen to do face to face? What do you get out from it?
I look at people who do online, and honestly, sometimes I think like, oh, I am jealous because it looks great. The flexibility that you have, especially anyone who is doing having that gorgeous lifestyle of traveling around the world and teaching from wherever they are on a gorgeous beach or whatever. Like that is something I envy. But I really enjoy the face-to-face teaching. I think we've talked about this before, like the energy that you get from the being in front of other people. It works and I enjoy it, and that was always going to be my plan. Like I never really considered tutoring online. Like the only experience I really have of teaching online was during the pandemic, and obviously that was like stressful. But I did enjoy it to an extent, and I still tried to make it as enjoyable and fun as possible for the kids. Like I used to make silly videos with like Snapchat filters and stuff like that. But I really missed them just being in front of me as well, and just being able to like quickly whip out resources and that sort of thing. So I think for me, I would have to do a lot of learning myself about to offer the same like standard I think that I can get doing face to face. I think I would have to learn a lot about teaching online again, which I would have to invest a lot of time into, and I don't know whether I would enjoy it as much. So this is what works for me. This is what I wanted to do, and I think that you should in everything look for the joy and what you want, like rather than following, what you think you should do or what other people are doing.
Yeah, because you could easily just fall into the trap of going down, right, this is the industry trend, everybody's going online, let's just do that, without doing the proper research around actually what is really working. Yeah, of course online's working, but so is face-to-face, so are tuition centres. Like there's actually a space for all of those things. It would be interesting to see how it goes over the next 5 years. But and why not invest some time in learning about online, while you're doing the thing that brings you joy? There's no reason why you couldn't do that. But on a personal level for me, I just prefer it. I love being face to face. I've done online, fully online tuition. I've also do hybrid now, so I do some online, I do some face to face. I have hybrid group sessions where some join via video link, and some are here. I think that's quite nice to be able to offer that. So I feel like I personally not gonna kind of say
Never.
that the business will always be face to face. I'm not sure, is the truth. Right now, though, I can honestly say without doubt that I go home with as much energy at the end of the day face to face as what I do starting the day off with face to face. Whereas online, when I used to teach online all day on a Sunday, like my first session used to be 8 a.m. My last one used to be 7 p.m.
Wow.
I was absolutely drained, like
Yeah.
super drained. And I don't know if it's because you're looking at the screen. I don't know whether it's because the energy is slightly different. I struggle to pick things up as well. Like I find it harder to read somebody on a screen compared to when I see them in the flesh. I can pick up on things. So I think that suits my skill set. However, I do think that regardless of what you prefer, you just got to choose the right route that feels okay. And that could be, if you've not even started yet, that could just be you driving around for a bit and you go to people's houses, or it could be that you start off inside your own house. It's one-to-one at the table. You might have a group of friends come to your house and you do some tutoring with them, whatever it may look like. But don't discount this growth and this way of like growing your business with your joy at the center of it, because that is important, like for all the reasons you said, like the mental health side of things, but also for its growth. Like
Yeah.
if you're not enjoying it, that's going to just seep
100%.
into the things that you do.
Yeah. If you're unhappy, that will show, I think, in your success and your growth.
Mm,
Like, if you're not happy with it, it's not going to work.
mm,
And I think that's why I love that first session in your course is all about your vision, and it's not just the business, it's your personal life as well. Like,
mm,
what do you want your life to look like? You can choose it. Like, you can curate your own life. Here's your chance. Do it.
mm. I think that's really important. I'm doing a lot of writing around this, like within the Facebook group, but also if I'm doing workshops or whatever I'm talking about, because there's a lot of people out there who will just say, "Here's a blueprint, just copy this," and I've gone down that path myself when I was first looking for some support. And the truth is, it's like that's somebody else's blueprint, that's somebody else's life that you're trying to almost copy and paste over. And sure, there are going to be elements that will work, but there will also be large elements which wasn't written for you. And they're the bits where you have to fill in the blanks yourself, which means you're kind of still left in the same place you were before, like not knowing the answers. And so when you're creating a vision for your business, that has to sit alongside some personal goals. It has to, because
Yeah.
otherwise you don't find, we used to say this thing in strategy, right? Find the strongest reason why you want this to succeed. If you set yourself a goal, what's the strongest reason why? What's the strongest reason I'd like the center to succeed? Because I love face to face. I'd love a place which I could make my own. I mean, I joke a little bit. We this is the second time we've recorded this because the audio went wrong in the first one. But we joked in that one. I'm taking it a little bit more seriously this time. Is that I've been in this room for about 18 months, and it's very clinical, like a stereotypical guy. I'm just not doing displays, or very good at doing like the little details, I would call it. And I've got a couple of tutors and they're like, can we just put some stuff up? And I'm like, yeah, please, because it
Yeah.
just needs to be
Please do
less.
it.
Yeah, it's just less like a hospital waiting room and a place
Oh,
where people can come in and learn. And don't get me wrong, like We have great sessions here, loads of fun, loads of energy, but it'd be quite nice to have it a bit more softer, I think. To have a place that's your own. So what's the strongest reason for it to succeed? Yeah, I want to have a strong business with good income, but I would like it to be and feel like Mr. C's tutoring. That's at the heart of it. And plus, there are so many other benefits that we haven't even spoken about. Like, let's do the window of time. So when I was in a community centre, I used to do 3 hours. I could only have it between 4 and 7. There was no setup time,
Yeah, very
and so
strict.
yeah, and so I had to sort of be in a corridor with the parents beforehand. It would be a rush to get in and set up in time, and then the same on the way out. And so it felt pressured. I mean, rightly so from their point of view. There was no kind of buffer either side. And I know some centres will give you that, but not a lot. And then I came here for the similar price per month that I was already paying. I get this 24/7. And so
Yeah.
not only has it helped with the tuition business, but it's also helped to have a space during the day where I can come and work without distraction. I've been able to put more effort into Tutors Who Thrive, not just the tuition business. So it's kind of become, or has this sort of hybrid use, just because I've got Tutors Who Thrive as well. And it's because I don't have this little window of time. I can use it all day, every day if I really wanted to, 24/7. And I think that's a big, big plus and a big, big bonus to the business.
Yeah. Same.
Okay, so we wrap it up.
We
Is there anything we've missed that we want to talk about and share before we recap?
So yeah, we were just going to talk about like kind of the things to be wary of, like
Okay.
unexpected or extra costs as well. So when you see somewhere so my rent is like pretty much £700 a month, but I also have like the utilities to pay and all the extra little hidden costs of things like that you never really think about is like cleaning and having enough like toilet roll and all those things that you've got to consider and know about then. And also being prepared for like so I had an unexpected bill, so two at the same time, which was like about £1,500, and I wasn't expecting it, and I was quite taken aback, and I thought, oh no, and it came in the same week that I had to cancel some sessions because I had COVID, and then I got a parking ticket the same week, and all these awful things just happened in this 1 week. So just going back to that, being prepared for that. At the time, it was, I mean, I survived it obviously, but it's definitely taught me about having a buffer in place. So one of the things that I have now is in my like business bank account, the pots, and I have one that's called buffer, so that there is something there in case of these type of hopefully unlikely, but unexpected like emergency situations, so that everything does just keep running smoothly.
Would you say, Vicky, going back to when you sort of be a year ago, would you, I'm not saying you would have stalled or like put back a move in, put back when you moved in, but ideally, would you have had some sort of buffer set up ready to go?
Well, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
absolutely. But I didn't. I just didn't. I didn't. I didn't think about that, and which again goes back to that how much you learn as you go. Like when you are running a business, whether it's in a place or from home or wherever, we're constantly learning new things, aren't we? But I would say that it's that going back to that thing we said at the start, like it's not an if only thing, because if it's not happening wherever you are, it's very unlikely for this to be a magic wand where everything will then happen for you if you just had your own place.
Yeah.
It's actually more likely that will just be hugely stressful, and you won't make any extra money. It'd be worse off probably. So yeah, but then on the plus side, looking at the example from the numbers, which I worked out, was that if I was to stay in the church hall, doing what I was doing, my maximum like potential earnings would probably be, so just term time only, after costs would be around £38,000 a year. Like that would be my like top limit of what I could earn. And then when I worked out, if I did move, so my tuition space that I have here has got 2 rooms, so I can have 2 groups running simultaneously. Obviously, I've got it 24/7. So, but even discounting like any sort of daytime work, any extras in the holidays that I might do, like little workshops, or I do mock exams and things like that. So just looking at like after school groups, 4 days a week. If I was to do that, even after all the costs of paying tutors, the rent, everything all in, you're still making over 100k profit.
Insane, isn't it?
So it's just
When you
like,
hear it, like, look, we this is another frequently asked question: is can I make a full-time living out of tuition? But I don't want to oversimplify it, but at the same time, also not overcomplicate it. I think the answer lies between those two things. But when you
yeah.
listen to those numbers, it's like, all right, this is actually quite an achievable.
Well, the key word I would say there is potential. So that's the potential. I'm not saying that that's where I'm at right now, but that's the potential. That's the aim. And yeah, and then there is scope for more than that, because there is scope for daytime or, holiday stuff. So yeah, it's there is huge potential, but it's not a breeze. You do have
No,
to put the work in.
agreed. I think then let's just quickly recap, because I know there's a lot of information in here. So the first thing to consider is your reason why. Why do you want to do it, and why now? Are you ready? Like, is the business ready for that to happen? So we're talking financially,
Yeah.
as well as other systems. We've not really spoken too much about the systems, but for a tuition center to be successful, you need to know how you're going to find clients. You need to have at least a steady amount of inquiries to make it work. So make sure those systems exist. So financially it works, but the system works for finding clients. Make sure it's not that, oh, if only I had this center and I know my business would do okay. Look, there might be a truth in that, but it's more likely that if you're currently driving around or doing a different business model that's not a center and it's not working, it's likely that you need to go and do the work on the business model rather than go and laden yourself up with stress and strain and pressure. So bear that in mind. Run the numbers. I mean, if you've learned anything from what Vicky shared today, just make sure it's about running the numbers. Look at the potential earnings. Look at what you're currently earning. Does it all work out? Is it going to be worth the pressure and the risk? And I suppose the last thing would be, well, the last couple of things would be, think about the location, but don't overthink it. But you want to kind of make sure it's easy enough for everybody, but mainly you. And then are you doing it because it's like your passion? Like you heard me and Vicky say that these are the reasons we like face-to-face. Are you the same? Because if you can grow online, why wouldn't you do that? Why wouldn't you choose that method? Because that's the one where you can grow without as much friction or as much financial friction. I suppose the last thing that we spoke about there was buffer. Really looking at the buffering, like having a sort of financial buffer somewhere.
Yeah.
Is there anything that I've missed there, Vicky, that you think that we should add in?
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, let's leave it there. Now, the reason we're doing this is because it is a frequently asked question in the group. This now becomes a resource that people can connect with. And that's really important that we create these pieces of information so everybody can go in with their eyes open. Look, I realise this is still only, under 50 minutes at the moment. So it's not absolutely everything, but it will at least give you a taster.
Yeah, I think that's what people are looking for, is just a taste of what's been the experience for other people. I find that helpful anyway.
Well, okay, let's leave it there. Thank you so much, Vicky, for sharing your insights in this. We really appreciate it, and we'll speak to you all soon.